European leaders are meeting in Brussels with a momentous decision still on the table, whether or not to use billions of euros frozen Russian assets to fund a loan for Ukraine. Now, the meeting between EU leaders comes as Vladimir Putin has warned that Russia will seize more land in Ukraine unless Kyiv and its European allies do more to engage with the US peace proposals. Let's go straight to Brussels. My colleague Rajini Vaidyanathan is there. Hi, Rajini.
Hi, Lewis. Well, as you mentioned just there, those meetings will be getting underway, and we've seen EU leaders arrive here already. Now, this isn't about trying to secure a peace deal. This is all about trying to secure financial support for Ukraine as the conflict continues on. And, of course, those efforts to secure peace continue to stall. Now, what we've heard from the IMF is that Ukraine needs some 135 billion euros over the next 2 years to keep the country going and to keep that war effort going as well. And there are more than $150 billion of Russian assets in Europe, well more than that. And around 140 billion of those assets are held here in Belgium. And one of the questions that's going to be debated and discussed today is whether some of those frozen Russian assets can be used to help Ukraine in the form of some sort of loan. But the challenge here is EU leaders cannot agree on this proposal. Most notably, the Prime Minister of Belgium, who says that he and his country will be at a great risk because those assets are currently being held in his country, and this hasn't been done before. Well, it does sound a bit complicated, so let's speak now to my colleague, our Ukraine correspondent James Waterhouse, who is inside the meeting rooms behind me at the European Council. So, James, first of all, just tell us what's at stake today.
Well, for Ukraine, this is about its budget, pulling the country through the next couple of years. You've highlighted the gap in its finances. President Zelensky just this morning has admitted that if this unfreezing of Russian assets is not agreed today, then it would be a big problem for Kyiv. And the reason for that is America has made it perfectly clear that it is not going to contribute. And Europe is now running out of money. That is what is privately admitted here in terms of how to fund Ukraine. And if we're talking about a country at war, still on the receiving end of Russia's invasion, then it's not as simple as public spending cuts. I'm just keeping half an eye on the red carpet. It goes much deeper than that for Ukraine. So it's crucial. This proposal from the European Commission, the executive part of the EU, is seen as central to Ukraine's survival, for it to survive long enough for a lasting peace deal to be agreed. But from the red carpet here, there is already division. You're already detecting it.
So, James, what are the odds of a deal being done today?
Well, I certainly wouldn't be making any bets today. I mean, what is required for these Russian assets to be unfrozen is what's called a qualified majority. So it's around 2/3. But Viktor Orban, for example, Hungary's prime minister, a long-time ally of Vladimir Putin of Russia, he has stood here and claimed that he has a sizable minority that will block this proposal. Belgium is the biggest opponent, as you say, and its prime minister, Bart de Wever, has said his position has not changed this morning. Now, is that brinkmanship, or is that a genuine belief of Belgium? As for countries like Germany, its Chancellor Friedrich Merz has said, look, he is confident an agreement can be reached. But what officials are saying is that no one will be going home until there is an outcome.
Okay, James Waterhouse from inside those meetings for the moment. Thank you very much. Well, as James was outlining there are divisions amongst EU leaders about whether to unfreeze these Russian assets. But Ursula von der Leyen, the head of the EU Commission, has been one of the architects of this proposal. Let's have a listen to what she had to say as she arrived at these meetings today.
This European Council comes at a very decisive time. We have one ultimate goal in this European Council, and that is peace for Ukraine, peace with strength. And for that, Ukraine needs to have a secure funding for the next 2 years, the year 26 and 27.
Ursula von der Leyen there. Well, as James said a short while ago, divisions extend to some countries here, notably Hungary, that are very close to Russia. And so Viktor Orban is likely to be someone who is not going to support any sort of plan which would use those frozen Russian assets. Let's have a listen to what he had to say as he arrived.
The whole idea is a stupid one, to take away the money of somebody. There are two countries which are in war, yeah? It's not European Union, Russia and Ukraine. And somebody, European Union, would like to take away the money of one of the warriors party and then to give it to another one. It's a marching into the war. So the Belgian Prime Minister is right. We should not do that.
That's Viktor Orban there. Now, when you hear some of those things, it reminds you, of course, that these discussions and any discussions around Ukraine do provoke very different reactions. But EU officials are keen to stress that if any of this happens or doesn't go through, Russia ends up being the overall winner. Kaja Kallas, the Vice President of the EU Commission, said as she arrived here that Russia just wants this deal to fail.
We see strong push for peace, but it's one-sided. We haven't seen any willingness from the Russian side to move or seriously talk about peace. Even the ceasefire for the Christmas was rejected. So clearly we need to put the pressure on Russia so that they would go from pretending to negotiate to actually come to the table and really negotiate. And of course we have the discussions on the reparations loan. Now the proposals that we have been working on, also addressing Belgium's concerns. I think to go for the legislative proposal means that we all take the risk because it's a European proposal, so the risk and the burden is shared equally. So I think the issues that Belgium has raised, we have also addressed, so I hope that we get this over the finishing line. Putin is banking on us to fail, so we shouldn't give them that.
Kaja Kallas there. Well, let's discuss what's at stake in a bit more detail. I'm joined now by John Foreman, the UK's former defence attaché to both Moscow and Kyiv. Welcome to BBC News. First of all, a lot of people are saying that these are some of the most consequential meetings that the EU Council's had in recent years. In your assessment, how much is at stake today?
Well, good morning, Virginie. I mean, I'm a connoisseur of the European Council and I worked in the European Union, and every one of these meetings seems to be consequential and brinkmanship. But I think on this occasion, people are right, it's a very significant moment for Ukraine, as explained by James. Without support from the European Union, Ukraine's going to have a financial crisis next year, and Europe needs to step up and continue to fund Ukraine, not to win, but to endure whilst the peace negotiations continue.
And on that point, John, we are seeing differences in terms of the approach to the use of these frozen Russian assets. Belgium, its Prime Minister, hugely concerned about the risk that the country would be exposed to because it carries and holds most of those assets. What is the way forward on that front then? There's talk about ways to perhaps share that risk amongst European nations.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the Belgian Prime Minister talked about, quote, legal, financial, economic risks. And there's also security risks. We know from the Guardian reporting that Russia's been putting threats onto the head of Euroclear and perhaps the Belgian Prime Minister himself. So I think the Belgians are seeking assurances that those risks will be shared amongst European countries and that they wouldn't be holding all the risks should America and Russia do a deal and Russia sues the European Union for its money back. I don't think those are insurmountable. And I put Mr. Orban's comments to one side because he's always awkward. He opposes any support to Ukraine. So I think there's probably a way forward, but it's going to be a very, very late night. And there'll be lots of shenanigans and blackmail and arm twisting to get this over the line at some stage tonight or tomorrow morning.
What we've seen with all of these recent talks, other talks, of course, to try and secure peace in Ukraine, is that the US is not investing as much as it once did under previous administrations. So In that sense, someone who knows both Moscow and Kyiv very well, how much is at stake because the US is pulling back a bit?
Well, the US has stopped all financial support under Trump and has also dialed back direct military support and is asking European countries and others to buy American arms and give them to Ukraine to continue. America wants to use the money as part of a grand deal. Russia doesn't want to give any money at all to Ukraine. Ukrainians need money. And I think we have to think through the consequences of the fiscal crisis next year should this deal go through. I mean, Ukraine wouldn't be able to pay its soldiers, it wouldn't be able to pay pensions, it wouldn't be able to run services, and it wouldn't be able to support troops at the front. And there's obviously the risk then of capitulation or Ukraine having to be forced into a very bad deal. And I think it's also a risk on the European Union to say it will confirm the reputation of ditherers and being divided and not being able to step up at the strategic moments. So potential consequences are high, and that's why I would urge Europe to find the way forward tonight and get the money to Ukraine to continue to survive.
OK, John Foreman, former defence attaché for the UK for both Moscow and Kyiv. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts and insights. And as John was saying just then, these meetings could go late into the night. Some optimism from John there that some sort of deal could be done. But it really is on the edge about whether or not these frozen Russian assets could be unfrozen to support Ukraine and its ongoing war efforts. Because, of course, as I was saying, Lewis, the Belgian Prime Minister, the country where most of those assets are held, has really, I should say, real concerns about that. So there'll be a lot of back and forth in the meeting rooms behind me. It's also worth mentioning that the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is due to arrive here any moment now, and he's going to be addressing the meeting as well. So there'll be a very heartfelt personal plea from him to those European Union leaders to try and twist some arms.
Virginie, thank you for that.